father locked me and my sister in the basement for 6 years and called us creatures, then tried to drop us into a mine shaft to finish what he started. When I asked my mom why she watched it all happen, she just stared at her coffee and said, "Beds are for people who matter." I didn't say a word. That was 9 years ago. Last week, she died in a nursing home with no one at her funeral. How did you know your father was not a girl, Dad? My father kept all daughters locked in the basement because he said women didn't deserve to see sunlight, and by the time I escaped, I'd been living in darkness for 6 years. Dad had always treated women like property. He made Mom sleep on the kitchen floor because beds are for people who matter. He wouldn't let us daughters eat at the table, saying we should be grateful for scraps on the ground. When I got my first period at 12, he said I was officially worthless and needed to be kept where no one could see my shame. He'd refer to us as the basement creatures and make us cover our faces if we ever had to come upstairs because our female features might corrupt his sons. When my sister Hope turned 13, Dad announced that we were getting too old to contaminate the upper floors. He'd finished renovating the basement with locks on the outside. "Women belong underground," he said. "Like worms, you'll learn to live without light." He pushed us down the stairs and locked the door. Mom watched from the kitchen, saying nothing. She'd been broken years ago. The basement had a toilet, a sink, and 2 mattresses on the concrete floor. No windows, no lights except a single bulb Dad controlled from upstairs. He'd turn it on for 1 hour each day while we ate whatever food he threw down the stairs. The rest of the time, we lived in complete darkness. Hope and I held hands constantly, terrified of losing each other in the black. Living underground destroyed us slowly. Our eyes grew so sensitive that the daily hour of light became agony. Our skin turned gray from lack of sun. We lost track of time, not knowing if it was day or night above us. Dad would sometimes leave us in darkness for days as punishment until we begged through the door. He'd laugh and say moles didn't need light anyway. We were allowed upstairs once a month for 10 minutes to shower. Dad would blindfold us first, saying we didn't deserve to see his house. Hope developed severe vitamin D deficiency, her bones softening until walking became painful. I started having panic attacks in the darkness, hyperventilating until I passed out. Dad said we were being dramatic and cut our light time to 30 minutes. After 3 years underground, Hope got sick, really sick. She had a fever that wouldn't break, coughing up blood in the darkness. I pounded on the door for hours, begging for help. Dad finally came down, took one look at her, and said she was faking. But when she started having seizures, even he got scared. He couldn't let her die in his basement. He blindfolded us and brought Hope upstairs. I heard him tell Mom to call their friend who was a nurse, not a real hospital. When the nurse arrived, I heard her gasp. She demanded to know why a 16-year-old girl looked like she'd been kept in a cave. Dad said we had a rare condition that made us allergic to sunlight. The nurse didn't believe him but treated Hope anyway. She whispered to me that she'd be back. The nurse reported us, and child services came the next day. Dad tried to stop them from going to the basement, claiming it was flooded, but they pushed past him and found our prison. The investigators were horrified. They documented everything. The bucket we used when the toilet backed up, the scratches on the walls where we'd tried to count days, the bloody handprints on the door from when I'd pounded until my hands bled. We were removed immediately and hospitalized. Doctors said we had the vitamin deficiencies of kidnapping victims. Our eyes were so damaged from darkness that we had to wear special glasses. Hope's bones were brittle as an elderly woman's, but we were free. Dad was arrested and Mom was deemed unfit. We went to a foster home with windows everywhere. I thought we were safe. I was relearning how to exist in daylight, how to walk outside without panicking. Hope was getting stronger. Then one night I woke up to find Dad standing over my bed. He'd made bail and broken in. "You think you can live up here with real people?" he whispered. "You're basement creatures. You belong in the dark." He drugged me with something that made my limbs heavy. I tried to scream but could only whisper. He carried me to his van, where Hope was already unconscious in the back. As he drove, he explained his new plan. He'd bought property in another state with an old mine shaft, 60 feet underground, he said. "No one will hear you down there. No one will ever find you." I fought to stay conscious as he described the shaft. No stairs, just a rope. No toilet, just a bucket on a pulley. No light at all, ever. "You wanted to leave the basement," he said, "so I found you something deeper." He'd already thrown our belongings down the shaft, food and water for maybe a month. After that, we'd starve in the darkness unless we learned to be grateful. The van stopped on empty land. I could see the wooden cover over the mine shaft and the headlights. Dad dragged Hope out first. She was starting to wake up, mumbling my name. He opened the shaft cover and I heard nothing but black emptiness below. "Ladies first," he said, looping the rope around Hope. "Don't worry, you'll have each other, for as long as you last." As he started lowering my sister into the endless darkness, she screamed my name, the sound echoing up from the depths. I tried to crawl toward them, but my drugged legs wouldn't work. All I could do was watch as my sister disappeared into the black hole, her screams getting fainter. Dad turned to me with a rope, smiling. "Your turn," he said. "Time to go home." My fingers clawed at the dirt, trying to find something to grip as Dad approached with a rope. The substances made everything feel like I was moving through thick syrup. Hope's terrified voice echoed up from the shaft, calling my name over and over, each cry fainter than the last. Dad wrapped the rope around my waist, his hands methodical and practiced. I thrashed weakly, managing to knock his hand away, but he just laughed and grabbed my wrists. The headlights from his van cast long shadows across the barren ground, making the shaft opening look even darker. I bit down hard on his arm when he leaned close. He cursed and backhanded me, sending stars across my vision. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. While he nursed his arm, I rolled sideways, away from the shaft. My legs still wouldn't cooperate fully, but adrenaline was fighting against whatever he'd drugged me with. He grabbed my ankle and dragged me back toward the hole. I dug my fingernails into the ground, leaving grooves in the dirt. Small rocks scraped against my palms. The rope around my waist tightened as he started wrapping it more securely. From deep in the shaft, Hope had gone quiet. The silence was worse than her screams. I kicked out with my free leg, catching Dad in the knee. He stumbled but didn't let go. Instead, he sat on my legs, pinning them while he finished securing the rope. The shaft opening was only feet away now. I could feel the cold air rising from it, smell the damp earth and decay. Dad tested the rope, making sure it would hold. He'd attached it to the bumper of his van, planning to lower me slowly like he had with Hope. I grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it in his face. He sputtered and wiped at his eyes, giving me seconds to work at the rope knot. My fingers were clumsy from the substances, but desperation made them move. The knot loosened slightly before he recovered and slapped my hands away. He dragged me to the very edge of the shaft. My legs dangled over the side, kicking at nothing but air. I could see the rope disappearing into the darkness where Hope had gone. Dad positioned himself behind me, ready to push. I twisted suddenly, using the last of my strength to grab grab his shirt. If I was going down, I'd take him with me, but he was ready for that. He peeled my fingers off one by one, then shoved me backward. For a moment, I hung at the edge, half in and half out of the shaft. My hands found a thick root protruding from the side. I held on desperately while Dad tried to push me the rest of the way down. The root was old and partially rotted, already starting to tear free from the earth. Dad stomped on my fingers. I screamed but didn't let go. He stomped again, and I felt bones crack. The pain cleared some of the substance fog from my mind. I swung my legs, trying to find any foothold on the shaft walls. My foot connected with something solid, a rock ledge just below the opening. I pressed against it, pushing myself up slightly. Dad leaned down to pry my broken fingers from the root. His face was close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. I spat blood in his eyes and heaved myself up with my good hand. He reeled back, giving me space to get my elbows onto solid ground, but the substances and exhaustion were winning. My arms shook violently, barely holding my weight. Dad recovered and grabbed the rope still tied around my waist. Instead of pushing me, he started pulling me up and away from the shaft. I realized his plan. He wanted to position me better for a cleaner drop. No chance of grabbing roots or finding footholds if he dropped me from the center. I went limp, making myself dead weight. He grunted with effort, dragging me across the ground. The rope burned against my skin through my shirt. When he paused to adjust his grip, I rolled hard to the left, tangling the rope around his legs. He tripped and went down on one knee. I kept rolling, wrapping more rope around him. He tried to step out of it, but only tangled himself further. His frustration was building, making him careless. While he worked to free his legs, I crawled toward his van. My broken fingers screamed with every movement, but I forced myself forward. If I could get to the driver's seat, maybe I could drive away, get help for hope. Dad freed himself and came after me. He caught me at the van's bumper, where the other end of the rope was tied. He pressed my face against the cold metal, using his weight to pin me. Something feels off about how the dad managed to break into a foster home and kidnap both girls without anyone noticing. Foster homes usually have security measures and multiple adults around, so I'm curious how he pulled that off so quietly. The position gave me an idea. I grabbed the rope where it connected to the bumper and pulled hard. The sudden tension made Dad stumble. I pulled again, using the rope like a pulley system. He had to step back to keep his balance. I kept pulling, forcing him to move away from me. The rope between us grew taut. He realized what I was doing and charged forward, but I dropped flat to the ground. He tripped over me and hit the van's bumper hard. While he was dazed, I worked at the knot connecting the rope to the bumper. This one was simpler than the one around my waist. My good hand fumbled with it while my broken fingers throbbed uselessly. Dad shook his head clear and grabbed for me again. I kicked backward, catching him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping. The knot came free in my hands. Now the rope was only attached to me, not the van. I started crawling away from the shaft, dragging the rope behind me. Dad recovered and stepped on the rope, stopping me short. He began pulling me back toward the hole, hand over hand like he was reeling in a fish. My good hand found a sharp rock. I grabbed it and started sawing at the rope around my waist. The fibers were thick and resistant. Dad pulled harder, dragging me through the dirt. My shirt rode up and rocks scraped my stomach raw. The shaft opening was getting closer. I sawed frantically at the rope, feeling some strands start to give way. Dad gave a mighty pull that slid me several feet at once. My legs were near the edge again. I dropped the rock and grabbed onto a small bush growing near the shaft. Its roots were shallow, and it started pulling free immediately, but it slowed me down enough to grab another handhold, a partially buried tire from some old illegal dumping. Dad walked closer, keeping the rope taut. He was done playing games. His face showed cold determination as he prepared for one final push. I wrapped my arms around the tire, knowing it was my last anchor. He yanked the rope violently. The force pulled me several inches, but the tire held. He yanked again, harder. I felt my grip weakening. My broken fingers couldn't help hold on. The substances still made everything fuzzy and slow. From deep in the shaft, I heard Hope cough. She was still alive down there, waiting for me to save her, or to join her. The sound gave me a surge of desperate energy. When Dad pulled again, I suddenly let go of the tire and rushed toward him instead of resisting. The unexpected slack in the rope made him stumble backward. I barreled into his legs, knocking him down. We rolled in the dirt, fighting for control. He was stronger, but the substances affected my pain response too. I couldn't feel half the hits he landed. My broken fingers bent at wrong angles when I tried to grab him, but I kept fighting. He finally pinned me, sitting on my chest. His hands went to the rope, preparing to drag me the final few feet. The shaft opening was right beside us now. I could see stars in the circle of darkness, so far above where Hope must be. I remembered something from our years in the basement. Dad always kept his car keys in his left front pocket, always. It was one of his habits Hope and I had memorized during our monthly trips upstairs, always looking for information that might help us someday. My good hand shot to his pocket. He tried to block me, but I already had the keys. I squeezed them tight, the metal edges cutting into my palm. Then I threw them as hard as I could into the darkness of the shaft. The keys disappeared without a sound, swallowed by the black. Dad's face went from confusion to rage as he realized what I'd done. Without those keys, he couldn't move the van. We were miles from anywhere, on property he'd bought secretly. His escape plan was gone. He roared and wrapped his hands around my throat. I clawed at his arms with my good hand while my broken fingers flopped uselessly. Black spots danced in my vision, darker than the shaft beside us. The pressure on my throat increased as Dad's face twisted with fury above me. My vision tunneled, but I forced my good hand to keep moving, searching the ground blindly. My fingers found a small stone, and I swung it weakly at his temple. The impact was minimal, but it made him shift his weight slightly. That shift was enough. I bucked my hips hard, using the momentum to roll us sideways. We tumbled dangerously close to the shaft edge. Dad released my throat to catch himself, and I gasped for air, my lungs burning. The substances were still heavy in my system, but the adrenaline and lack of oxygen had sharpened my focus slightly. Dad scrambled to his feet first, kicking me in the ribs as he stood. I curled into myself, protecting my stomach while trying to catch my breath. He paced around me like a predator, his breathing heavy with exertion and rage. The headlights created harsh shadows across his face, making him look even more monstrous than usual. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. The substances made my muscles feel like water. Dad grabbed my hair and started dragging me back toward the shaft. Each pull sent shooting pains through my scalp. I dug my heels into the dirt, creating resistance, but he was too strong. My good hand found another rock, larger this time. I twisted in his grip and brought it down on his foot with all my remaining strength. He howled and released my hair, hopping on one foot. I crawled away as fast as I could, which wasn't very fast at all. The rope still tied around my waist dragged behind me, catching on rocks and roots. Dad recovered quickly and grabbed the rope, using it to reel me back. I flipped onto my back and kicked at him with both feet. One kick connected with his shin, but it barely slowed him down. He wrapped the rope around his hand for better grip and pulled harder. I remembered the sharp rock I'd been using to cut the rope earlier. It had to be somewhere nearby. My hands swept the ground frantically as Dad dragged me closer to the shaft. My fingers found it just as my feet reached the edge again. I sawed at the rope with desperate intensity. Dad noticed what I was doing and lunged forward, trying to grab the rock. I rolled away, keeping the rock pressed against the rope, feeling more fibers snap. He grabbed my wrist and squeezed until I thought the bones would break, but I wouldn't let go. We struggled for control of the rock. Dad's superior strength was winning, but then I heard Hope's voice from the shaft again, weak but alive. The sound distracted Dad for just a second. I yanked my hand free and slashed the rock across his forearm, drawing blood. He cursed and pulled back, examining the wound. I used the moment to saw through the last strands of rope. It fell away from my waist, and I was no longer tethered to anything, but I was still too drugged to run, and we both knew it. Dad's expression changed from anger to calculation. He walked to his van and returned with a flashlight, shining it down the shaft. I could hear him muttering about the depth and checking the rope Hope was on. The beam of light disappeared into the darkness without illuminating the bottom. I tried to crawl toward the van while his back was turned, but my movements were still sluggish. Dad heard me and turned around, his face calm now, which was somehow worse than his rage. He walked over and grabbed my ankle, dragging me back toward the shaft with methodical patience. My fingers clawed at the ground, finding purchase on an exposed tree root. Dad pulled harder, and I felt my shoulder strain from holding on. He stepped on my hand, grinding it into the dirt. I bit back a scream and held on tighter. He increased the pressure until I had to let go. This time, he dragged me to the opposite side of the shaft from where I'd been before. The ground here was smoother, with fewer roots or rocks to grab. He positioned me at the edge again, but instead of pushing me immediately, he sat down beside me, catching his breath. He explained his new plan in detail, describing how he'd lower me down slowly, letting me dangle for a while before dropping me the rest of the way. He wanted me to have time to think about my choices, about how I'd brought this on myself by trying to live in the world above. I used his monologue as an opportunity to let more of the substances metabolize. My head was clearing slightly, though my limbs still felt heavy. I flexed my fingers and toes, trying to gauge how much control I had. Not much, but maybe enough. Dad stood and grabbed under my arms, lifting me partially. My legs dangled over the edge of the shaft. The cold air from below made me shiver. He held me there, suspended between solid ground and the abyss, savoring his control. I went completely limp, becoming dead weight in his hands. The sudden shift made him adjust his grip, bringing me slightly forward. I used that momentum to hook my leg around his knee and pull. He stumbled but didn't fall, dropping me onto solid ground to regain his balance. I rolled away from the edge and struggled to my hands and knees. Dad kicked me in the stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I collapsed, gasping, but managed to keep rolling, putting distance between us and the shaft. He followed slowly, knowing I couldn't get far. The substances were wearing off gradually, but not fast enough. My broken fingers throbbed with each heartbeat. I could taste blood in my mouth from where I'd bitten my tongue during the struggle. Dad grabbed my hair again and dragged me back. This time, he positioned me parallel to the shaft edge, planning to roll me in sideways. I twisted in his grip, making it harder for him to control my movement. He slapped me hard across the face, making my ears ring. The slap actually helped clear my head more. Pain was cutting through the substance fog. I focused on that clarity, using it to plan. Dad was getting tired too. His movements were slightly slower, his breathing more labored. He was older, out of shape from years of easy dominance in his household. Talk about turning the tables with a rope trick. She went from being tied like a package to using that same rope like she's in some twisted tug-of-war game, making Dad dance backward like he's doing the world's worst line dance. Then she pulls the classic move, dropping flat so he face plants into his own van bumper. He tried to roll me toward the shaft, but I spread my arms and legs wide, making myself as difficult to move as possible. He grunted with effort, trying to force my limbs together. I kept spreading them out again every time he moved to a different limb. Frustrated, he straddled me, using his weight to pin me down. His hands went for my throat again, but this time I was ready. I tucked my chin down and bit his hand hard when it got close enough. He jerked back, shaking his hand in pain. I used his moment of distraction to bring my knee up hard between his legs. He doubled over, rolling off me with a groan. I crawled away as fast as I could, which was faster than before. The substances were definitely wearing off, though I was still far from normal. Dad recovered quicker than I'd hoped. He caught my ankle just as I reached the van's rear tire. I kicked back with my free foot, catching him in the chest. He held on, but the impact knocked him back slightly. I kicked again and again, each strike weaker than the last, but still maintaining distance. He changed tactics, grabbing both my ankles and dragging me backward. I twisted onto my back and sat up, reaching for his face. My broken fingers were useless, but my good hand found his eyes. I pressed my thumb against his eye socket, making him release my legs to protect his face. I scrambled under the van, hoping the confined space would make it harder for him to grab me. Dad dropped to his knees, reaching under the vehicle. His arms were longer than mine, and he managed to grab my shirt. The fabric started to tear as he pulled. I wrapped my arms around the van's drive shaft, holding on as my shirt ripped away. Dad cursed and reached further under, trying to get a better grip. I kicked at his hands, connecting with his fingers. He pulled back, then tried from a different angle. The ground under the van was covered in old oil stains and debris. I found a rusty piece of metal, probably part of an old muffler. I gripped it like a weapon, slashing at Dad's hands whenever they came close. He jerked back after one particularly good hit, his palm bleeding. He stood and walked around the van, trying to predict where I'd exit. I stayed in the center, watching his feet move from one side to the other. He was getting impatient, making his movements more predictable. When he committed to the passenger side, I quickly crawled out the driver's side. I pulled myself up using the van's mirror, my legs still shaky but functional. Dad came around the front of the van, his face a mask of cold fury. Blood dripped from his hand and forearm where I'd cut him. His clothes were dirty and torn from our struggle. He advanced slowly, backing me toward the shaft again. I sidled along the van, keeping it between us. We circled the vehicle like a deadly game of tag. My legs were getting stronger with each passing minute, but I was still too slow to outrun him. Dad suddenly changed direction, catching me off guard. He grabbed my arm as I tried to reverse course. His bloody hand left red smears on my skin. I twisted in his grip, using a move I'd seen in a movie during our brief time in foster care. It didn't work perfectly, but it loosened his hold enough for me to pull free. I stumbled backward and my foot caught on something. I looked down to see the rope that had been around my waist earlier. An idea formed through the clearing fog of substances. I grabbed the rope and ran around the van, Dad close behind. I looped the rope around the van's front bumper as I passed, fast, then continued to the rear. Dad followed, not realizing what I was doing. I wrapped the rope around the rear bumper too, creating a trip line between them. When Dad came around the back of the van, his foot caught the rope and he went down hard. His head hit the ground with a solid thump. He lay still for a moment, dazed. I didn't waste the opportunity. I grabbed the flashlight he'd dropped earlier and brought it down on his knee. He howled and curled up, clutching his leg. I backed away, still holding the flashlight like a club. Dad tried to stand, but his injured knee buckled. He fell back down, cursing. I could see the calculation in his eyes as he reassessed the situation. I was more functional now, and he was injured. He started crawling toward me, using his arms to pull himself forward. His determination was terrifying. Even injured, he wouldn't stop. I backed up more, trying to maintain distance while looking for another weapon or advantage. My back hit something solid, the wooden cover of the shaft, leaning against a rock where Dad had placed it. I glanced between him and the heavy wooden disc. It was thick, probably weighing 40 or 50 pounds. In my current state, I wasn't sure I could lift it. Dad saw where I was looking and increased his crawling speed. I grabbed the edge of the cover and strained to lift it. My muscles screamed in protest, still weak from the substances. The cover rose a few inches, then dropped back down. Dad was almost within grabbing distance. I tried again, putting everything I had into lifting the cover. This time I got it up to knee height before my strength gave out. It fell toward Dad, who rolled aside just in time. The heavy wood thudded into the ground where he'd been. He used the van to pull himself upright, balancing on his good leg. I ran, or tried to run, toward the open shaft. Maybe I could use it as a barrier between us. My legs moved in an uncoordinated stumble, but it was faster than his injured hobble. I reached the shaft and turned to face him. He was using the van for support, making his way toward me. The hole gaped behind me, Hope's occasional whimpers echoing up from the depths. I picked up a rock and threw it at Dad. My aim was off, but it made him duck. He let go of the van and hopped toward me on one leg, his arms outstretched for balance. It would have been comical if it weren't so terrifying. Even injured, even hopping, he was still coming for me with single-minded determination. I threw another rock, this one hitting his shoulder. He grunted but kept coming. I backed up until my heels were at the very edge of the shaft. One wrong step and I'd join Hope in the darkness. Dad saw my precarious position and smiled. He lunged forward, trying to push me backward. I sidestepped at the last second, and his momentum carried him to the edge. He windmilled his arms, trying to regain balance. I could have pushed him then. One small shove and he would have fallen, but I hesitated. That hesitation cost me. Dad managed to fall forward onto solid ground instead of backward into the shaft. He grabbed my ankle as he fell, pulling me down with him. We landed hard, him partially on top of me. His weight pressed me into the dirt. I struggled beneath him, but he had leverage now. His hands found my throat again. This time, I couldn't reach anything to defend myself with. My vision started to go dark at the edges. In desperation, I brought my knee up into his injured knee. He screamed and rolled off me, clutching his leg. I gasped for air, my throat feeling crushed. Every breath was agony, but I forced myself to keep moving. I crawled toward the van, thinking of Hope still trapped below. I had to survive to save her. Dad's hand caught my foot just as I reached the van's tire. His grip was weaker now, but still determined. I kicked back, my heel connecting with his face. I heard his nose break with a wet crunch. He released me, both hands going to his face. Blood poured between his fingers. He tried to speak, but only managed a gurgling sound. I pulled myself up using the van's door handle. My legs shook, but held my weight. I looked back at Dad, still on the ground, blood pooling beneath his face. He rolled onto his side, spitting blood. His eyes found mine, still full of rage despite his injuries. He tried to stand, but his knee wouldn't support him. He started crawling again, leaving a trail of blood in the dirt. I stumbled to the driver's door and tried the handle. Locked, of course. The keys were somewhere at the bottom of the shaft. I looked around frantically for something to break the window. Dad was getting closer, his crawling more determined despite the pain he must have been in. I found a large rock near the front tire. I hefted it, my arms shaking with the effort. Dad was only feet away now, reaching for my leg. I brought the rock down on the driver's window. It bounced off, the safety glass holding strong. Dad's fingers brushed my ankle. I stepped back and swung the rock again, putting my whole body into it. This time the window cracked, spider webbing from the impact point. One more hit and it shattered inward, pebbles of glass covering the seat. I reached through the broken window and unlocked the door. Dad grabbed my leg just as I opened it. I fell half into the van, my upper body on the seat while he held my legs. He started pulling me back out, his grip slippery with blood. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, even my broken fingers wrapping around it despite the pain. Dad pulled harder, and I felt my grip slipping. In desperation, I kicked backward with both feet, connecting with his already broken nose. He released me with a howl of pain. I scrambled fully into the van and slammed the door, hitting the locks immediately. Dad pounded on the window with his fists, leaving bloody handprints on the glass. His face was a mask of blood and fury. I searched the van frantically for keys, knowing I wouldn't find them. The ignition was empty, the cup holders bare. Dad had stopped pounding and was looking around for something to break the remaining windows. I had to think fast. The van's interior light illuminated various items Dad had brought: rope, water bottles, some canned food, and in the back, I saw something that made my heart race. A cell phone, probably forgotten in his rush to recapture us. It was plugged into a charger connected to the van's power outlet. I climbed between the seats to reach it, my body protesting every movement. There's something really strange about how the dad keeps getting back up no matter what happens to him. I'm curious why he's so focused on pushing her toward that shaft when he's already hurt this badly. The way he just keeps crawling after her with a broken knee and smashed nose makes me wonder what's driving him to ignore that much pain. Dad had found a large branch and was approaching the passenger window. I grabbed the phone just as he swung. The window exploded inward, showering me with glass. The phone was locked, requiring a passcode. I tried obvious combinations: his birthday, our address, all zeros. Nothing worked. Dad reached through the broken window, trying to unlock the door. I scooted back to avoid his grasp, still fumbling with the phone. Then I remembered something. During our monthly showers, I'd once seen him unlock his phone. The pattern had been simple, a straight line down the middle. I tried it, and the phone unlocked. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Dad had given up on the door and was climbing through the window. His upper body was inside the van, broken glass cutting into him as he pulled himself through. I kicked at his head while trying to tell the operator our location, but I didn't know where we were. Dad had driven for hours to reach this place. I could only describe the mine shaft, the remote location, and beg them to track the phone. The operator assured me they were tracing the call, but it would take time. Dad grabbed my foot, his bloody hand slipping but maintaining grip. I dropped the phone to defend myself, hearing the operator's voice asking if I was still there. Dad pulled himself further into the van, his face a terrifying mask of determination and pain. I grabbed one of the water bottles and smashed it against his head. The plastic bottle did little damage, but the water mixed with the blood on his face, getting in his eyes. He blinked rapidly, momentarily blinded. I used that moment to grab the phone again, shouting our situation to the operator. Dad lunged forward blindly, his hands grasping. I rolled into the back of the van, putting the seats between us. He pulled himself fully through the window and turned to face me. We stared at each other across the van's interior, him bloody and injured but still dangerous, me exhausted and terrified but finally substance-free enough to think clearly. The operator was saying something about units being dispatched, but I knew they'd never arrive in time. Dad started climbing over the seats toward me. I grabbed the remaining rope and threw loops of it at him, tangling his arms. He fought against it, but his injuries slowed him down. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, the operator's voice my only lifeline to the outside world. Dad's bloodied face contorted as he fought against the rope tangling his arms. I pressed myself against the back doors of the van, still clutching the phone while the operator kept asking questions I couldn't focus on answering. The substances had mostly worn off now, leaving me with sharp clarity about our situation. Hope was still down in that shaft, and help was too far away. Dad managed to free one arm from the rope and lunged forward again. I dodged sideways, causing him to crash into the back doors. The impact made him grunt in pain, his injured knee buckling. He collapsed onto the van floor, breathing heavily. Blood from his broken nose had soaked into his shirt, making dark stains that spread with each labored breath. I scrambled over him while he was down, heading for the front of the van. My broken fingers throbbed as I climbed between the seats, but I pushed through the pain. Dad grabbed my ankle just as I reached the driver's seat. His grip was weaker than before, slippery with blood and sweat. I kicked back hard, my heel connecting with his shoulder. He lost his grip and fell backward. I turned to see him struggling to sit up, his movements sluggish from blood loss and exhaustion. The operator was still talking, saying something about GPS coordinates and estimated arrival times. I set the phone on speaker and placed it on the dashboard, needing both hands free. Dad crawled forward again, dragging his injured leg. His determination hadn't wavered despite his injuries. I searched the van's interior frantically, looking for anything useful. The glove compartment held only papers and a broken pen. Under the passenger seat, my fingers found a small toolkit. I grabbed a screwdriver just as Dad reached the front seats. He tried to pull himself up using the headrest, but his strength was failing. I held the screwdriver defensively, though my hand shook. We both knew I couldn't bring myself to use it as a weapon, but the threat might slow him down. He paused, evaluating the situation. Blood continued to drip from his nose, and his injured knee couldn't support any weight, but his eyes still burned with that familiar rage. He reached for the screwdriver, moving slowly, testing my resolve. I pulled back, keeping it out of his reach. The operator's voice crackled through the speaker, asking if I was still there. I confirmed I was, my voice hoarse from the earlier choking. Dad used my moment of distraction to grab the phone from the dashboard. He held it up, his thumb hovering over the end call button. We locked eyes. If he disconnected, the police might lose our location. Hope would stay in that shaft. We'd both disappear forever. His thumb moved closer to the screen. I dropped the screwdriver and grabbed for the phone. We wrestled for control, the device slipping between our bloody hands. It fell, bouncing off a gear shift and landing near the pedals. We both dove for it, colliding in the cramped space. Dad's weight pressed down on me as we struggled. His blood dripped onto my face, mixing with my own sweat and tears. I managed to get my hand on the phone first, but he grabbed my wrist, trying to pry it away. His grip was still strong despite everything. I bit his hand, tasting copper. He jerked back with a curse, giving me enough space to roll away with the phone. The operator was asking what was happening, having heard the commotion. I gasped out that we were still here, still needed help. My sister was in a mine shaft. Dad slumped against the passenger seat, his energy finally depleting. His breathing was ragged, and his face had gone pale beneath the blood, but he wasn't giving up. He started pulling himself toward the broken driver's side window, apparently planning to exit the van. I realized his intent. If he got out, he could block the doors, trap me inside until I had to come out, or worse, he might find something to break the remaining windows. I couldn't let him gain that advantage. I climbed over the center console and grabbed his shirt as he reached the window. We struggled again, but his movements were sluggish now. I managed to pull him back from the window, both of us collapsing onto the driver's seat in an exhausted heap. The phone had fallen again during our struggle. I could hear the operator's distant voice asking for updates. Dad and I lay there for a moment, both too exhausted to continue fighting immediately. His blood loss was significant now, his face ghostly pale. He made one more attempt to reach the window. I wrapped my arms around his waist, using my body weight to hold him back. He was too weak to break free this time. We stayed locked in that position, him reaching for escape while I held on with everything I had left. Minutes passed like hours. Dad's struggles grew weaker until he finally stopped trying. He slumped back, his breathing shallow and labored. I kept holding on, not trusting his stillness. The operator's voice continued from wherever the phone had fallen, a lifeline to the outside world. I heard something in the distance. Sirens, faint but growing louder. Dad heard them too. His body tensed, and he made one last desperate attempt to break free, but his strength was gone. He could barely lift his arms. The sirens grew louder, closer. I could see flashing lights in the distance, cutting through the darkness. Dad's breathing became more ragged. He turned his head to look at me, his eyes still defiant despite everything. His lips moved like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. Multiple vehicles arrived, their headlights illuminating the scene. I heard car doors slamming, voices shouting commands. Someone approached the van cautiously. I called out that we were inside, that my sister was in the mine shaft, that they needed to hurry. An officer appeared at the broken window, taking in the scene. Dad and I were still entangled in the driver's seat, both covered in blood. The officer called for medical support while asking if either of us had weapons. I shook my head, too exhausted to speak. More officers arrived. They carefully opened the passenger door, assessing the situation. Two of them gently pulled Dad out first. He didn't resist, too weak from blood loss to fight anymore. They laid him on the ground and immediately began first aid on his injuries. Someone helped me out next. My legs gave out the moment they touched ground, and I had to be supported by two officers. I pointed frantically at the mine shaft, trying to explain about Hope. My words came out jumbled, but they understood enough. A rescue team was already setting up equipment around the shaft. They had proper gear, harnesses, ropes, powerful lights. One of them rappelled down while others managed the safety lines. I watched, holding my breath, as they disappeared into the darkness where Hope had been for what felt like hours. The wait was agony. Paramedics tried to examine me, but I pushed them away, needing to see Hope brought up first. They wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and tended to my broken fingers while I kept my eyes fixed on the shaft opening. Finally, movement. The rescue team was hauling someone up. Hope emerged strapped to a rescue board, unconscious but breathing. The paramedics rushed to her immediately, checking vital signs and starting IV fluids. She was alive, battered and traumatized, but alive. They loaded Hope into an ambulance first. I insisted on riding with her, despite the paramedics wanting to treat me separately. As we pulled away, I saw Dad being loaded into another ambulance. Police officers standing guard. He was conscious but restrained, his face a mask of defeat beneath the blood. Phone passwords during a life or death struggle? Classic dad move. Even his security choices are basic. Watching her remember that simple swipe pattern while he's literally crawling through broken glass is like the world's most twisted game show. The screwdriver standoff really shows how even armed with a weapon, she can't match his level of violence. But apparently biting works just fine when someone's trying to steal your lifeline to help. At the hospital, they separated us for treatment. My broken fingers needed setting and casting. They cleaned and stitched various cuts, took x-rays to check for internal injuries. Through it all, I kept asking about Hope. The nurses assured me she was being treated, that she'd be okay. Hours later, they finally let me see her. She was sedated but stable, hooked to various monitors. The doctor explained she had hypothermia from the cold shaft, along with bruising from the fall, but no life-threatening injuries. The psychological trauma would take longer to heal. Police officers came to take my statement once the doctors cleared me. I told them everything. The years in the basement, the rescue, Dad breaking bail and kidnapping us, his plan for the mine shaft. They recorded it all, building their case. Dad would never get bail again. Over the following days, Hope and I remained in the hospital. Our foster parents came, having been notified by police. They'd been searching for us since we disappeared, working with authorities to track Dad down. They sat with us in shifts, making sure we were never alone. Hope woke up properly on the third day. Her first word was my name, reaching for my hand. I held her with my good hand while my casted fingers rested uselessly at my side. We didn't need words. We'd survived another darkness together. Child services got involved again, evaluating our placement. But our foster parents fought to keep us, arguing we needed stability after everything we'd endured. The court agreed. We'd stay with the family that had shown us what real care looked like. Dad's trial moved quickly. He pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence, though the judge still gave him 25 years. Mom had her parental rights permanently terminated. We were finally, legally, free from both of them. No more looking over our shoulders. Our foster parents helped us change our last names, a fresh start with new identities. Hope chose Sunshine as her middle name, a defiant response to all the darkness we'd known. I picked Dawn for mine, new beginnings after the longest night. Recovery wasn't linear. Hope developed severe claustrophobia, unable to handle small spaces. I couldn't sleep without lights on. My body convinced darkness meant danger. We both attended therapy twice a week, slowly processing years of trauma. But we had windows now, real windows that opened to let in fresh air and natural light. Our foster parents never questioned our need to keep curtains open during the day or our multiple nightlights. They understood some fears were earned through experience. Hope started school again, making friends who knew nothing about our past. I got my GED and enrolled in community college, studying social work. I wanted to help other kids trapped in their own basements, literal or metaphorical. Our foster parents supported every step. The mineshaft property was sealed by authorities. The land eventually sold with disclosure of its dark history. Dad's van was impounded as evidence. All physical reminders of that night slowly disappeared, though the memories remained sharp. We testified at Dad's sentencing hearing. Hope spoke about the basement years and the terror of the shaft. I described the kidnapping and assault. Dad showed no remorse, still believing we belonged to him. The judge added 5 years for his complete lack of accountability. Our brothers never reached out. They'd been poisoned too thoroughly by Dad's worldview. We grieved that loss but focused on building our chosen family. Our foster siblings became real siblings in every way that mattered. Years passed. Hope graduated high school with honors, then college with a degree in education. She wanted to teach kindergarten, to show little kids the kindness we'd never known. I finished my social work degree and started working with abuse survivors. We lived together through college, neither ready to be apart. Our apartment had huge windows and too many lamps. Visitors sometimes commented on how bright we kept things, but we just smiled. They couldn't understand how precious light became after years of darkness. Hope met someone in her senior year, a gentle soul who listened to her story without flinching. He understood her need for open spaces and bright rooms. When they married, the ceremony was outdoors under the midday sun, not a shadow in sight. I found love too, with someone who'd survived their own childhood trauma. We understood each other's night terrors and hypervigilance. Together, we built a relationship based on patience and mutual healing. Our wedding was at sunrise, celebrating new beginnings. Neither of us had children for years, too afraid of repeating patterns, but eventually, Hope announced her pregnancy. We both cried, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. When her daughter was born, she named her Aurora, another word for dawn. I became an aunt who spoiled Aurora relentlessly. Hope was everything our parents weren't: patient, loving, protective without being controlling. Watching her parent with such grace helped me believe I could do it too. 2 years later, I had my own son. We raised our children in the light, teaching them they deserve to take up space in the world. No basements, no darkness, no shame for existing. They grew up confident and loved, never questioning their worth or right to sunshine. Dad died in prison during his 15th year. We learned through official channels, feeling nothing but relief. Mom passed a few years later in a nursing home, alone. We didn't attend either funeral. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. Hope became a beloved kindergarten teacher, known for making every child feel seen and valued. I specialized in helping trafficking survivors, understanding darkness in ways my colleagues couldn't. We turned our trauma into purpose, refusing to let it define our limits. Thanks for letting me wonder through it all with you. And hey, here's hoping your own stories come with fewer question marks than mine. Until we meet again, like the video. It helps more than you think.